In the quiet town of Dry Creek, where the wind carried dust and sorrow in equal measure, there lived a woman named Clara Whitfield, a widow whose heart had long ago been buried alongside her husband beneath the cracked earth of the churchyard. Clara had once been full of light, known for her laughter that rang out across the prairie, but since the day she buried Thomas, her world had dimmed to embers. She lived alone in a small cabin at the edge of town, tending to her garden, her livestock, and the aching silence that filled her nights. Every dawn she rose with the sun, her hands busy, her mind drifting, and her eyes often fixed on the horizon as though waiting for something, or someone that would never come. The townsfolk whispered kindly about her, calling her strong, but strength was a poor substitute for the warmth she had lost. One stormy evening, as the clouds rolled heavy and the thunder groaned across the sky, Clara heard the pounding of hooves outside her cabin. She stepped out with a lantern, suspicion and caution in her veins, and found a stranger slumped over his horse, bleeding from a wound across his side. His hat was torn, his coat covered in dust and blood, and his eyes, deep, desperate, and burning with survival, locked with hers before he collapsed into the mud. Clara's instincts warred with her grief-hardened heart, but she could not leave him there to die. She dragged him inside, laid him across her late husband's bed, and worked feverishly to stop the bleeding. For hours she boiled water, tore cloth for bandages, and whispered prayers she had nearly forgotten how to say. The man, though weak, murmured thanks between clenched teeth, calling her angel when fever threatened to drag him under. As the storm raged on outside, Clara kept vigil, her hands trembling, not from fear but from the strange stirring. Inside her, a reminder that life, wild and unpredictable, had a way of forcing its way back into broken hearts. When the storm broke, the dawn revealed him more clearly, a rugged cowboy, with scars of a man who had lived through battles, both with bullets and with his own soul. His name, he told her once consciousness returned, was Jacob Ryder, a drifter chased by men who wanted him dead. Though whether he was hero or outlaw, Clara could not yet know. She only knew that for the first time in years her cabin felt alive, the air thick with something more than silence. She tried to steel herself, to remind her heart of the grave she had already wept over, but when Jacob took her hand with a feverish grip and whispered, "Don't let me die cold and alone," she felt a crack in the wall she had built around herself. That night, as she sat beside him, brushing damp hair from his forehead, she realized she was trembling, not from fear of the stranger in her bed, but from the terrifying possibility that passion, which she thought buried with Thomas, was still alive within her chest. And though she told herself he was just a wounded man in need, a flicker of warmth began to burn, threatening to light the ashes of her widow's heart. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm Clara had not known in years. She rose early, fed the animals, and then tended to Jacob's wound, watching with reluctant fascination as the strength slowly returned to his frame. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, his voice carried a quiet weight that filled the room. He told her of nights spent under endless stars, of gunfights that left ghosts in his dreams, and of a life lived on the edge of law and survival. Clara listened, torn between caution and curiosity, finding herself drawn into his world even as she reminded herself it was not hers. Each evening, when the fire crackled low, Jacob's gaze would linger on her with something unspoken, and Clara found herself remembering the way Thomas used to look at her before the war stole him away. It frightened her, this awakening, yet it also thrilled her in ways she thought lost forever. One night, as coyotes howled in the distance, Jacob rose unsteadily from the bed, his hand reaching for hers. "Clara," he said, his voice rough and low, "I don't got much left to give, but I need you to know, being here with you, it's the first time I've felt like I wasn't just running from death. You've given me something I didn't think I deserved. Warmth." His words cut through her like lightning, and though every instinct told her to guard her heart, tears welled in her eyes. "I can't lose again, Jacob," she whispered. "I buried love once, and I swore never again." He lifted her chin with calloused fingers, his eyes burning into hers with a desperate tenderness. "Then don't call this love," he said. "Call it survival. Call it fire. Call it whatever you need to, but don't shut it out." In that moment, under the flickering firelight, Clara felt the walls around her crumble. Their lips met, tentative, at first, then fierce, like two souls clinging to each other against the storms of life. It wasn't the polished love of her youth, but something raw, imperfect and real. For the first time in years, she felt alive, her heart racing not with grief but with hope. The next morning, the town woke to whispers of riders. Approaching the men who hunted, Jacob had found their trail. Jacob saddled his horse, grim determination in his eyes. But before he left, he pulled Clara close. "If I don't come back, remember this, you brought me back to life." She clutched his shirt, begging him not to go, but the cowboy's path was one of danger, and he could not let it follow her doorstep. As he rode out, the rising sun lit his figure like a promise, and Clara stood in the doorway, her chest aching with fear and longing. Whatever fate awaited him, one truth had become unshakable. She was no longer a woman buried in grief, but a heart reborn by a stranger's desperate plea for warmth. And though the prairie winds still carried sorrow, they also carried fire. And Clara knew that passion, once thought dead, could never truly be buried.